What's up, everybody? This is Jake Garay, CEO of Realty Resolutions. I'm here with my co-founder and COO, Rob Gorski, coming to you live with episode number 5 of Realty Check, an intro to wholesaling. Something that most people who are watching this video probably have no idea what that is. I didn't know what this was until, about a year ago. It's very, very niche. Kind of unheard of and not as mainstream as some other forms of real estate investing, but if you know what you're doing and you learn it, you'll be amazed to see how incredible it can be to generate profits for you pretty quickly as well. Rob's a pretty big expert on this stuff. He's been doing it for a while. I'm going to kind of let him take the lead on this and kind of throw in my 2 cents as we go along. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake. Like Jake said, wholesaling is kind of that hidden gem in real estate investing. Most of the time, when you hear of real estate investing, you think of buying and flipping a house and rehabbing it, just like you see on HGTV and all those other shows that are out there. Immediately, that's what people think of when they're flipping houses. But the great thing about wholesaling is that I love is that you sometimes don't even need any money. It's little to no money, so it's very little risk.
It's a great way for people who want to get involved in real estate investing but have no capital to do it.
Yeah. So very briefly, what wholesaling exactly is. Wholesaling is when you put a property under contract, right, and you just assign that contract to another investor. To make things even more simpler than that, let's say that Sally just inherited a home and she's looking to sell her house. She doesn't want the house anymore. We contact her, she contacts us, and we, after looking at the house, after seeing what the repairs are, how much is going to need to go into it, we determine that that house is probably worth $50,000. Now Sally agrees to put that house under contract for $50,000. Now we know, Joe, who's an investor, he likes to rehab houses. That's what he does for a living. He rehabs houses, then he resells them for a higher margin. We know that he'll buy that house, or he looks at it, he's like, okay, I'll buy that house for $60,000. We then take that contract and we assign it to Joe, who buys the house from Sally for $60,000. Now that difference of that $60,000 and $50,000, that's our wholesaling fee. So we'll get $10,000 off that contract, and as you can see, that's just one example, but you can see that we didn't use any of our money. We just got the house under contract, and the great thing about getting a house under contract is that when you get a house under contract, you set aside a deposit on that contract, and that deposit could be anywhere from $1 to $1,000. I've had wholesale contracts where I've given somebody $10 for a deposit, and I've had the contract for 30 days, and that person allowed me to wholesale that contract for a 30-day period, and I was able to find another investor who wanted the property for a higher price than I had it under contract for, and I just assigned that contract to them.
So basically, just to summarize, you find a house that's distressed, right? So maybe it needs a little bit of work, maybe it needs a lot of work.
Right.
But the homeowner doesn't want the house anymore.
Exactly.
For whatever reason. Now, we can talk about seller motivation in a minute.
Right.
But that house is worth, let's say, after market, $150,000, and we'll use the same numbers. They maybe owe $10,000 on it. Right. So you can then offer them $50,000, knowing that after the $50,000 to $60,000 in repairs, there's it'll sell for $150,000. So I can go to Joe and say, hey Joe, here's a house that you can be into for $100 and sell for $150 and make $50,000.
Exactly.
So he has motivation to buy that house from you as the person with the capabilities to rehab that house, and the person with the materials, the access to capital, all that different stuff.
Exactly.
He's the rehab and flipper.
Exactly.
You're basically the facilitator on the deal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people will probably ask themselves now, well, why wouldn't Sally just go to Joe? Why wouldn't Sally just find Joe and hey, give Joe for a higher price? Well, that's because she may not know where to find Joe. A lot of the times
Joe may not know where to find her.
And Joe might not know where to find her, and that's where a wholesaler comes in, and that's what's great about it, because a wholesaler's primary job is to find those other investors and build that investor network of people who they know that want to rehab a house, and and they feel comfortable enough to where it's a win-win-win situation, to where Sally for example gets the price that she wanted for her house. She knows that she can't fix it up. She knows that she's not going to live there. It's not her primary residence. and she wants, maybe instant cash that we can provide with her within, a short period of time. And, we know another investor who wants that house and wants to, rehab it and make a profit. So it's a win-win situation for everyone around.
So let's walk through the steps here, starting with the seller. So I'm a seller. What's my motivation for selling my home? A couple different reasons.
Right.
What situation am I in that makes me want to sell my home? What is the benefit of selling my home to you and Joe rather than go to my friend Steve, the realtor down the street, and talk to him?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great question. And the thing about that is that if you go to a realtor, you're gonna be spending real estate commissions, and that can be anywhere from 5 to 6%. And that could add anywhere, from any dollar amount your home may be worth.
Not to mention closing costs. And the fact that it'll probably take you 3 to 6 months to sell the house.
Exactly. After you find an average home buyer or even somebody else who wants to close at a bank, and the great thing about that is that the buyers, the end buyers that we're bringing, Sally or anybody else who has a distressed home, is that they can close within 30 days. They're taking that contract on. So while we might have had it for 10 days. They're going to be able to close in 20 days, or they may ask for a certain extension, but that won't be any more than a 30-day extension. So these guys are coming with all cash and can purchase fast closing time. No banks allowed, no mortgages provided or anything like that. So it's a quick closing process, and and that's one of the biggest motivating factors when it comes to someone who's looking to sell their home.
So in an ideal situation, I'm Sally. You're coming to me and you're saying, listen, Sally,
mm-hmm.
I can sell your house for $50,000 in as soon as you sign this contract. It could be as soon as 7 days. You could have $50,000 in cash sitting in your bank account, and she has the added benefit of maybe she sells it for. She knows she's going to have to put $40,000 or $50,000 work into it.
Right.
So she's saying it's not her primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
She lives, maybe she lives in the town over, the state over, the country over.
Right.
Doesn't want to be involved with the process, knows that there's a lot of inefficiencies there,
right.
Doesn't want to work with contractors. Or maybe it's a different situation. I guess we could go into the motivation, behind sellers, whether it be, divorce,
yep.
Death in the family where the property's inherited.
Yep.
It could be something like a landlord who doesn't want to deal with the property anymore because they're out of state.
Absolutely.
Talk about some of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are great points. Yeah, and like Jake said, there's a lot of different motivating factors. It could be somebody who death in the family, they may have just inherited the home, and they may be in California where they might have the home residing in New York. They don't know what to do with that home. If the home's sitting there, they're paying a mortgage on it, or they're paying a property tax on it, and it's just sitting there and it's depreciating in value because no one's in it. It's falling apart. So in that case, they're obviously going to be very, very eager to sell their home. Now in another unfortunate case is divorce. Two people are fighting over whether or not who the home's going to. It might fall to somebody else who doesn't want it anymore. It might fall to somebody else. But either way, that's a problem that people are going to be motivated to get out of and want to give their home to somebody else. And the other one is definitely being a landlord. Landlords are there's a lot of landlords all around, and it's they might have too big of a portfolio to really manage all these homes that they have, or they might be getting stressed out that they have to deal with tenants calling them about toilet problems or plumbing issues or any other issues that come up. They might not want to deal with it anymore. They might not be seeing the cash flow that they initially thought they were going to see, so they'd rather try to sell that home to another investor who would take care of it better than they would. So those are all definitely definitely different parts of why someone would probably be motivated to sell their home, and I think that's primarily mostly it.
So this all sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
What are the steps? Let's say I'm Dave,
mm-hmm.
and it's day one, and it's day one for Dave.
Yeah.
And he wants to go and get involved in wholesaling. What are the steps? Walk me through the steps of.
Yeah.
Do you start? Obviously, it's very marketing, reliant.
Right.
So to make matters oversimplified and not to oversimplify and kind of put down what it is, but it's really just a glorified form of facilitating a deal and marketing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What are the steps? And from your experience, what are the most important steps?
Mm-hmm.
And where do you see, what makes a good wholesaler from just the entry level kind of just figuring this thing out, never done it before? What separates someone who makes money and someone who just sends out a bunch of maybe direct mail and makes no money?
Yeah, I mean, immediately I would say consistency. I would say that what makes a bad wholesaler is that they're going to expect to start wholesaling, and they're going to expect to see a $5,000, $10,000 check because they sent out a bunch of mail to people who lived out of state and might own a home in state. So I think that consistency is key. Now step one, in my opinion, is most important is building that cash buyers list. And what I mean by that is finding and networking with investors who are bringing cash to the table, and that they're quality investors who have experience of fixing up homes and potentially rehabbing them and flipping them. So it's always building that list. So my recommendation for someone who's new out there is
Dave, if you're listening
on day one, you need to start creating ads. And by ads, I'm saying go on, use Craigslist, use direct mail, use yellow letters. There's a bunch of different direct mailing sites that you can use. A different bunch of yellow letters you can send out. And a yellow letter is simply this. It's simply, just to touch on it briefly, is saying, hey, Sally, I'm interested in your home on 123 Main Street in Poughkeepsie, New York. I can close in 7 days with all cash. Please call me at 845-555-5555, and or reach me on an email. Thank you, Rob. And that's all you need to do, and send it out to their actual mailing address. And and you need to be consistent about it. Obviously, some people might see a yellow letter and just throw it away, or you'll get a lot of people who are motivated.
And that's why you typically follow up with a phone call.
Exactly, and that's why you follow up with a phone call. So there's a there's a process to this wholesaling, wholesale investing, to where you send out your yellow letters, you wait 5 days to when you think the delivery is going to be there, and then you make phone calls on the people that own these homes. Now, people immediately are going to think, I don't want to call anybody. I'm nervous to call anybody. Well, this is where it separates you. You need to almost suck it up and not be afraid to make a phone call onto a random stranger, because that random stranger could be in a position to where they're in trouble.
They need you.
They need you because they don't know what to do with the house that they may have just inherited, or maybe going to divorce and they're stressed out, and they're dealing with these problems, and they don't want to go to a realtor. They don't know what their home is worth, So you have somebody call them like, wow, yeah, I need to sell my home. I'm motivated. You'll get people like that, but you need to stay consistent. So I think, to go back to your question, what separates a good wholesale from a bad wholesaler is just sticking to the process. Create ads, create that list of investors that are going to be your go-to guys, who can purchase for all cash, and that you're going to rely on. Say, hey, listen, I found this house for you. It needs some work. It needs this amount of work. I have a contractor's bid for this amount of money. How much work is going to need? Is this something you might be interested in? And you'll find a lot of people who are looking for deals. You'll find a lot of rehabbers who are just looking for deals, but they don't know where to find them. They're spending so much time rehabbing and fixing their own houses that they don't have time maybe to find houses that we are able to provide them. That's where wholesaling is a huge process that comes into play.
So I'm Joe, the rehab and flipper.
Yep.
I'm willing to pay a $5,000 to $10,000 wholesale fee because I know, Rob, you're a reliable wholesaler.
Yeah.
You have always fed me phenomenal deals, and every time we do a deal together, I make $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000 to $50,000. I make money every single time. It's always a knockout home run deal. So I'm willing to pay you the $5,000 to $10,000 wholesale commission, or fee, whatever you want to call it, to go out and to find me homes.
Right.
So basically, to kind of just double down on what you were saying, you think that the most important thing obviously is to stay consistent with what you're doing, because the information itself, the process itself, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is some creativity there, but it's very generic.
It's very generic. Yeah.
So a lot of the content, that you're sending out to these people, a lot of the mail, a lot of the Craigslist ads, it's all very similar to what anybody would be doing.
Exactly.
So what's separating these people is size of list, because both lists, cash buyers and sellers, because you can't sell to someone that doesn't exist, and you can't sell something that doesn't exist to someone who wants to buy.
Exactly.
So each end of it is just as important. So the whole process of it is basically, first things first, you want to create these two lists.
Yep.
You go out and you start marketing. That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, you find the house, right? Walk me through the process of, okay, Sally now has agreed to sell her house for $50,000. The contractor has his bid in. Joe is going to pay you the $60,000. Now, how do you get that contract into Joe's hands? And what are the different options that I have? You know, maybe it's my first time working with Joe and I don't want Joe to know how much money I'm making. What is my options there? Or maybe Joe trusts me, he's willing to, like I said, pay that $10,000, that $5,000 fee for me to find the house, because we've now done 6 deals together. So how do I close this deal?
Yep, absolutely, and that's a great point you made. I think it's very important, if you want to be a good and reputable wholesaler, to always be upfront with people. Never try to hide how much money you're making. Never try to hide anything. Whatever price you got the house for, you should tell them. You should always be honest with them and tell them how much you get it for. If someone asks me, well, how much did you pick that up for? I'll always tell them, because you want to create that honest relationship. And I think a very important thing to recognize here is that you're not worrying about the quick $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 deal. You're worrying about that long-term relationship you have with somebody, because this is somebody who's always going to come back to you for anything.
Right.
So if you're upfront with somebody and you say, listen, I have this contract, I have it for $50,000. The price I'm asking for is $60,000. You have to back that. You have to back that number up. You have to be able to tell them, this is how much the house is going to cost. This is its ARV, or after repair value. This is how much the home is going to be worth after the work I know that you can do on it. This is how much it's worth. And if there's enough meat on the bone, the end rehabber usually is fine with that. They'll take, if they understand that you're making $5,000 to $10,000. They'll just appreciate that you found the deal if that means they're making $40,000, $50,000.
They're not going to do it if they're making the same amount, or $20,000, because they're doing 2 to 3 times as much time, and they have more skin in the game.
Exactly. And a great point you just brought into my mind is that what's great about wholesaling is that wholesaling is great, because if people who plan on rehabbing but don't have the capital, this is where you make your capital to do that down the road. And what's great about it is that you now understand what a good deal is.
Right.
If you find something that you're looking for, a $10,000 wholesale fee. So let's go back to that $50,000 example. Let's say I have the house for $50,000. I'm marketing it for $60,000 to other investors, other rehabbers, but no one's coming to me. I have 50 people on this list that I'm usually guys are, all right, yeah, I'll take this deal, but they're not budging. Right there, that should tell you something. This might not be a good deal. And that tells you something either further down the road, that when you do start getting into flipping houses and when you do start getting into rehabbing, you now know what a good deal is just by wholesaling, because you have to think not 1 step ahead, but 2, 3 steps on ahead to that end buyer who's eventually going to buy the house completely fixed up.
And it's a process where if you streamline it with the marketing and finding the sellers and finding the buyers, then you can cut out that middleman down the road as well.
Right.
Where if once you do get into, you do 5 to 10, you do 10 deals at $10,000 to $100,000, you can start rehabbing and flipping homes.
Yeah, right.
So you can streamline that process and save yourself that money that normally you'd be paying to a wholesaler.
Yeah.
To do that. So the closing process, we're at the closing table, and something that I think that we forgot to throw in there too is you're not only being upfront with the buyer, but you're being upfront with the seller.
Yep.
Because if you're not upfront with the seller, then the seller is going to say, when you go to closing, what do you mean you're selling my house for $60,000?
Yep.
You just paid $50,000. I could have sold my house to Joe.
Yep.
And so it's important that you are upfront with the seller, because ultimately in this business, you're building a business a lot on your reputation, because you're building your business with your reputation for your buyers, because if your buyers don't respect you, don't trust you, they're not going to buy your properties. And if your sellers come, let's say, oh, Rob Gorski just, called me and sent me a, direct mail letter. Let me look him up. Let me look up his company. Let me look up his website. And if there's bad feedback on working with them, oh, they were deceptive, they tried to make money off me, they tried to do X, Y, and Z. If you're not upfront with them and you could leave a bad taste in your mouth, then that could turn away a lot of potential sellers to your business as well.
Absolutely.
So going back, like I said, now we're at the closing table. Sally knows that you're selling the contract for $60,000, and Joe knows that you bought the contract for $50,000. So they both know that you're making money on this deal. What is the process then? Is there closing costs related with it? What's
I mean, usually when the first example you said, when Joe knows that he's gonna be getting a house for $60,000, the thing you want to avoid is a double closing. You always want to have Joe just closing the house for $50,000, and then you collect a wholesaling fee of $10,000. That's usually the most common way to do things. Now, if Joe is maybe not uncomfortable with that, or Sally is not comfortable with that, however it is, then that's when you do a double close, or you're in double escrow. So then you have to close in the house with your own funds, and then you do a double close where Joe buys the house from you from $50,000.
So now you do need the $50,000.
Yeah, then you do need the $50,000.
Which could lead to you having to then go to transactional funding if you don't have the $50,000,
Exactly.
which they then charge you, fees for and things like that. So now, if you have to do a double closing, you're paying double the closing costs because you're in double escrow. You have to pay the double,
Right.
the lawyer fees, whatever fees are involved, because it's not just one closing, it's two, as well as whatever transactional funding. So you want to obviously go to the table with everybody knowing and being aware of what's going on. That way you can just wholesale that contract, collect your money. The money's wired basically into Sally's, into your account, then into Sally's account, and then you're able to just
you have no ownership. You have to deal with any of the closing. You have to deal with any of the title, running title. You have to deal with any delays like that. The best thing you want to do is make sure everyone's aware of what's going on. This way, Joe can close on the contract, Sally gets her money, you get your money, and everyone's happy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So is there any other maybe landmines, anything that you want, warnings, things you want to be careful, maybe things that have worked really well for you in your experience, anything that really sticks out in your mind since you've begun doing this as important to kind of throw in here at the end?
Yeah, I would say one of the most important things is don't be afraid to hear no. A lot of people are afraid of rejection. They're afraid of, like I said earlier, they're afraid of picking up the phone and hearing somebody say, no, don't call me again, or no, I'm not interested in this, no, I'm not calling that. But you have to understand that you'll find somebody who's going to be very motivated to sell their home. So I think one of the biggest landmines in wholesaling is hearing that word no often enough, and that's where the whole being comfortable with rejection, getting told no, I'm not doing this. That's where you just need to, you got to almost put a shield up as if it's all right. That doesn't bother me. I'm gonna find somebody who is motivated to sell their home. And I think like the other big piece of information is like I said, it enables you to build up this capital and to eventually, if you have bigger aspirations on the road to rehab houses, then you learn all of these these different things and different tools, and to where you, like you said before, is that you don't need to you might not need to even need a wholesaler anymore, because you realize all the skills and things that you learned from being a wholesaler. Now you can now apply to different areas of your investing portfolio, and you can just apply it there. So I think those are probably the biggest things. And like I said before, since day one, is being consistent. Running your ads and being sure you're consistent, and don't do a small sample size. Don't do a week or 2 weeks basis and then call it quits. This is something that may take 6 months. But the great part about wholesaling versus starting off rehabbing, and I think that's why our biggest point of this is that wholesaling doesn't take 6 months, whereas if you were to rehab a house, you're looking at maybe 6 months where you're holding the house and you have property tax, you're paying a certain amount of money, whether you're borrowing money or from another investor, or you're borrowing money from another lender. You don't have to worry about all those different costs, and 6 months down the road you have to put your house in the market, and you have to deal with commissions in real estate and other closing costs. So wholesaling is a great part of that, because you're completely out of that whole situation. You're the middle guy. And you're providing solutions for both the buyer and the end, the seller and the end buyer. So that's why I love about wholesaling. That's why it's the most hidden gem in real estate.
It's very interesting. Most people have never heard of it. The question that when you start to talk and explain it to people is, they ask, is that even legal? Is that legal? You could buy the house but not buy the house, then sell the house but not actually ever own the house.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, like I said before, niche of real estate. So if you're an investor, future investor, whatever it may be, now that we've talked about, rental income, residual income, and being a landlord in a previous episode, and now more of kind of like an active form of real estate investing where you've got skin in the game and you're doing activity daily, which do you see as a better fit for you personally? Is it, going into wholesaling, then maybe into rehabbing and flipping? Is it going into wholesaling, then rehabbing and flipping, and then getting, putting your money away in rental income for residuals while continuing and growing your portfolio that way? Or do you feel like, I just want to wholesale, or I don't want to, wholesale, I just want to be a landlord, or, which do you feel fits your personality type, and which, sounds more appealing to you, and why? All right, guys, thanks for listening. We'll be back next time.